de corazones saldrán a tu encuentro. Miles de corazones saldrán a tu encuentro. Miles de corazones saldrán a tu encuentro. Miles de corazones saldrán a tu encuentro.
I'm on the phone here, Joanna Harcourt Smith, for futureprimitive.org, with Dr. Bradford Keeney. And before even reading part of his biography, I would like to say that his website is called shakingmedicine.com, and I love what it says on the opening page of the website. And it says, an invitation to experience shaking medicine with Bradford Keeney. Shaking medicine is spirited ecstasy, felt as a heightened joy that causes one to tremble, quake, and shake. This oldest medicine on earth tunes the whole being and opens the door to spirit. Dr. Keeney demonstrates shaking medicine with the life force theater and shamanic conversation. So I'll read you a little bit of his biography. Bradford Keeney, PhD, has served distinguished careers as a social cybernetician, systemic therapist, anthropologist of cultural healing traditions, conversation analyst, improvisational performer, and creative consultant. His classic text, Aesthetics of Change, is cited by Hans von Foerster as one of the key texts of cybernetics. Bradford Keeney has traveled extensively throughout the world to Canada, Mexico, Europe, Africa, Japan, Central and South America, and Australia, and particularly Africa. As a field worker, Keeney has been called an all-American shaman, the Marco Polo of psychology, and an anthropologist of the spirit. Keeney has written several books on healing and shamanism, and one of them is called Profiles of Healing, an 11-volume encyclopedia of the world's healing practices. But mainly his autobiography, Bushman Shaman, tells how he became, and I don't know how to pronounce it. Would you say it, Brad? An Kause shaman with the Kalahari Bushmen. So I'd like to start, and if you would like to add titles of other books that you've written, I would appreciate it. And perhaps at the same time, say your website again.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be with you. And my website is shakingmedicine.com. And there it will give all the propaganda, including books published and various offerings that I have just recently made available. So please take a peek and welcome to some surprises.
Wonderful. Well, let's go right in it. You say move over meditation and welcome heightened arousal and ecstasy. Please speak about that.
I think if I were to be as bold to say what I truly feel in my heart, it would probably be arguably one of the most controversial programs you've hosted. Namely, that it could be that the reporters about healing and shamanism in the old ancient ways have missed the most vital aspect of it.
Yes.
And I mean not missed a tangential part or, something that was a spice or an adjunct component. I'm talking about missing the heart and soul of the whole thing.
Uh-huh.
And let me say it a different way. I'll be historical for a moment.
Yes.
When we look at that first classic text that attempted to carve out for the Western mind the history of shamanism, Mircea Eliade, University of Chicago, we find that he did not go into the field, but he based his book upon the field reports of others. Sometimes they were anthropologists, and sometimes they were missionaries or simply world travelers. And what we found that was consistent in the old days and in the old ways is that people who were having communion with spirit or mystery, that which we can't define and have any idea what it is in any ontological sense, that which is mystery, when it touches us, it makes us wild. And they describe people who were so-called shamans or technicians of ecstasy, the subtitle of his book on shamanism, as those that appeared to have epilepsy or neurological disorders, or who were as mad as hoot owls. They did not know what it was they were beholding. They were seeing something that had all but been stamped out of our tamed culture. And there you have it. Everything that we admit is permissible and legitimate in our culture, and I mean both East and West, it is the same in the East as it is in the West, North and South, is that it must be tame, it must be calm, it must be convenient for words to map, express, and articulate in scholarly textbooks and in popular presses. But in fact, the old ones, the old ways, the original forms of healing and being in relationship to the great mystery was wild. And the last great taboo for us today is opening the door and inviting the wild, that which is uncontrollable, unpredictable, cannot be ever generalized, which will have its own mind, and we simply have to get out of the way. And when we do and surrender to this, which of course horrifies most of us who cultivate being in control as the ideal form of heightened human expression, if we get out of the way and let it fully come into our heart, we'll find that it brings the greatest joy imaginable, and that this is what we've been thirsting and hungry for all of our lives, and not ever had an opportunity to open ourselves to be wild. Now, I don't mean a wild in a stupid way where we run down the street and get arrested for being inappropriate. I'm talking about wild of inner and outer nature, letting the imagination be taken by orders of being that only the poets have had a slight hint at. And when we feel that we no longer can even talk, we're going to start shouting and making noises, and we're going to look like someone who's not accustomed to being the kind of person that typically goes on a circuit and gives a calm talk about these matters. You want to see someone who knows the spirit, you're going to encounter the wild, and it's going to be felt, not understood. It's going to come. It's not going to be a mind talking about the heart. It's going to be a heart that's put the mind in its place and allows the whole body electric to be fully excited and thrilled like children who can never sit still. And it's going to make us wiggle and move our booty and jump up and down and be ridiculous in a divine comic way. And this is the oldest way, and it was my great fortune, some might say misfortune, to fall off a cliff and find that it's joy, not convenient workshop explanations with protocols with 1, 2, 3 easy steps and procedures that can be easily acquired through learning. It's radical joy that turns us inside out and makes us play and be a trickster with any kind of words and saying, including what I'm saying now. It says, be still and let the Spirit take you for a ride. And it's not going to be a tame journey. It's going to be a wild journey where you are going to shake and quake and tremble, and you're going to lose your mind. And that's a great thing.
Brad, tell me how people, and I think there are many people who have never experienced joy, how can they experience this ecstatic joy?
Well, I think people can remember perhaps when they were a child and they were always fidgety and moving about, tapping their fingers on their desk and being told by school teachers and parents and older adults, get calm, get relaxed. And that voice came back when they went to meditation halls, and spiritual teachers said, get calm, get relaxed, don't wiggle.
Right.
And what I'm saying is, go back to being that child and bring forth what you were born to express, which is movement. I don't mean dance. Dance is a choreographed form that you consciously try to adhere to. I'm talking about going past the dance, having no purposeful attachment to any particular understanding, being moved. And yeah, you might have had a taste of it at a rave, at a rock concert with the Grateful Dead. You might have had a little breeze come through there. The whole point of rock and roll, blues and jazz and hip-hop is to shake you because the shamanic tradition went away. It was carried by the great bluesmen. It was carried by the rockers. It was carried by all those places that hide behind bars and musical venues, not in the sacred temples, and not in the churches, synagogues, or not even in the sweat lodges. It was found by the musicians who went wild and expressed sounds and rhythm. So when you recall times in your life when rhythm made you feel like you wanted to move, that was the beginning. Just let it go in a kind of purposeless, dare I say, reckless abandon. But certainly there is a wiring within us that we were born with. Nothing needs to be learned. You just need to press the start button, and it happens. I mean, people, even Carl Jung, who was scared to death of all these things and said it wasn't, the Western mind wasn't ready for it.
Right.
That was really a comment about Carl Jung.
Yeah.
But when he went to Africa, he heard the drums, and it scared the hell out of him. And yet he could feel its power. He could feel that drumming, the same way that Aldous Huxley heard the drumming and say, how could one not be moved and not feel the spirit on them? So I'm not talking about a tum-tum-tum-tum-tum-tum-tum repetitive hypnotic beat. I'm talking about wild, syncopated, unexpected, something you can't be entrained to that wakes you up. You see, it's not about going into trance.
Yeah.
It's about being awakened. And you might have had a moment of that in the blissful encounter, skin on skin, in lovemaking. You might have had it in the moment in which your hometown team won the final game, and you just sort of lost control and felt that shiver of electricity go down your spine. You may think you know what it is if you had a little cocktail called Kundalini.
Yeah, right.
That's a small taste, because the real thing will be nothing to be afraid of, nothing that will go short-circuited. This whole thing about spiritual accident isn't even found in the Kalahari. Let me say that again. I've got news, broadcast it loud and clear, where people are working the spirit in the strongest possible ways, where the Om, as they call it in the Kalahari, or Kundalini or Holy Spirit, or just Chi or Ki, it doesn't result in any spiritual accidents, where it's performed and expressed in the strongest ways. That's revolutionary. Why? Because it's never held in vitro, that is within the boundaries of one's skin. When you feel it, you share it.
You share it.
Within community.
Yeah.
You'll find others who want to boogie and go with it. There's more to it than that, but that's enough to tell the truth.
That's wonderful. Brad, tell me how Brad Keeney allowed himself to go wild, absolutely wild. Tell me how you were probably locked up in the culture. How did you come out of it?
Absolutely. I mean, I was a science nerd, and in the days when in high school I carried a slide rule on my pocket, and I had a pencil holder filled with pens, and I wore a white coat. I won the International Science Fair and received a scholarship to MIT. Now, how's that for a background?
Oh, yeah.
An ecstatic, heartful, mindless fool. But that was my beginning. But without knowing such an experience was available or was part of the possibilities of one's life, I spontaneously was struck by this kind of crazy lightning. I was 20 years old and was minding my own business, walking down the steps of a university building, and was suddenly hit and had one of those, it depends which metaphor you want to use. We can go Old Testament, New Testament, or call it a Kundalini.
A Kundalini, yes.
Or we can go straight to the Kalahari and say that the big God, the sky God, gave you all the gifts of and that's a very special thing. And, of course, I had no idea what had happened. I just knew that I found myself sitting in a chapel, shaking blissfully and wildly and feeling the heat and the ascension up my spine of this molten ball of inner lava that went slowly and surely as if it had a mind and purpose of its own, up, and out the top of my head, and then beheld this fantastic luminosity, this egg, which is about 10 feet in front of me, I looked into, and I didn't see, I didn't hear, I didn't feel. I had that synesthesia of see, hear, feeling all at the same time, so it felt like direct encounter, immersion, baptism, being fully embraced by the light that's felt. It's not about seeing the light. It's about feeling the light. And that's how we're going to announce the revolution right now. Don't go out seeing the light. Don't look to see it. Go out to feel it. Because when you feel it, it will fill you. It'll be like drinking a milkshake of holy light.
Yeah.
It's going to be a moonshake, and it's going to fill you inside and awaken, push all the buttons, all the circuitry that's been waiting to be released.
And what about if you feel afraid at that moment?
Well, an interesting thing for me is I had no fear. I personally had no fear, and that's probably due to the fact that I had the wisdom of complete ignorance. See, I hadn't been told that there were such things as Kundalini accidents. I hadn't been told that there were things you should be frightened of. And I wasn't walking around with unnecessary dualisms. You see, fear comes from the epistemological apparatus we carry. We live in a world in which the ways in which we throw our assumptions and premises into it come right smack back and slap us in the face. So if we walk around with a heavy-duty good-evil dichotomy, we get slapped by both, one on the left and one on the right. If you don't carry around anything, if there's none of that kind of distinction that's going to mess with it, all you get is
ecstasy.
You get ecstasy. And of course, there is a fear by some people when they hear about these matters because they think, oh my heavens, losing control. That's the most frightening thing I can imagine. In fact, the whole field of psychiatry and psychotherapy, for the most part, is doing what? Is trying to put a Band-Aid on any time spirit tries to shake you up.
Yeah.
Because if all of a sudden you feel like, oh, I'm out of control, the world's spinning, well, let's call that anxiety. Or I feel like I'm dissociating, splitting in two, let's call that psychosis. Or I'm finding I'm so overwhelmed by what's happening to me, I can't get up out of bed, let's call that depression. Well, you see, other cultures, as you well know, see these kind of events as tremendous, powerful spiritual teachings, which are saying you are not in control, and surrender yourself not to random madness, but surrender yourself to higher order control. That is, by control, I mean the balance, the dance, the patterns that organize the whole ecosystem, the cosmos, the divine, the dance of Shiva, which is a greater mind of that which we can circumscribe by our limited conscious knowing. So, in that way, I was just plain stupid. So Forrest Gump,
Yes.
with bliss, and so it's like, bring it on.
Yeah.
Now, I had the sense afterwards to know I better keep my mouth shut because this is going to sound, very crazy. But now, many, many, many years later, now 37 years later from that day when I was 30, when I was 20, I basically have been around the block enough, intellectually and experientially, to be able to stand and shout it loudly and clearly. We were born to fully be embraced by bliss. And I don't mean something that's going to be trivialized by, a sugar pill explanation. I'm talking about being hit by the lightning of the great mystery.
This is the best thing I've ever heard. This is the best thing I've ever heard. This is the best news I've ever heard.
Oh, I remember every time I would go to the few that have been left, and because, as you know, most of what's left of shamanic traditions are just barely articulating a partial truth of what used to be.
Yeah.
Because in the same way that all the world's religions became institutionalized and hit by all the concerns to have social control, so did the old shamanic tradition and the old healing tradition. The world was infected by textuality, whether it's held in oral or written tradition, and the whole game of life began to be what? Explaining things.
Yeah.
It came to be a word game. Well, fortunately, I was able to meet some of the oldest custodians of these wisdom ways in the Kalahari, the ancestral culture. We now know, because genetics proves it, we all come from Africa. We come from the oldest living people, the Bushmen.
Yeah.
Those, the Coke bottle fell from the sky.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not a political incorrect thing to say. They love that metaphor. They giggle when they see that film. And the heart of it, and I got to say it right now, is those who really work the spirit in the strongest ways take words the least seriously. They are the ones who laugh the most and see anyone's effort to give a right answer as being mad as a hatter. They say it's about allowing the whole of you, your whole mind, body, heart, and soul, to be moved by spirit. What is spirit? They wouldn't begin to an explanation.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone who tried to explain it, they would start laughing, saying, you can't possibly know.
Mm-hmm.
You can only be available to the full and feel it. And of course, they don't use the word spirit, they use the word which is roughly equivalent to the life force.
Mm-hmm.
So I could go on and on, but in a way, if I'm really going to express it, I just want to shout. I just want to talk about it in a way that brings forth a rhythm and makes us want to get up out of our chairs and hoop and holler, and run to a drum and allow spirited hands to be free to let it go. You know what happens when people get fully excited? Sometimes they can run to a piano without having a piano lesson, start playing.
Mm.
Sometimes they can go to a drum without ever having played a drum and be a master drummer. Happens in the history of the ecstatic tradition, including the African-American gospel church. That's how many of the gospel songs came. Someone got so seized and ecstatic, they just ran to an instrument and started playing a song well-formed.
And especially when we do that in community.
Oh.
When we do it together. Yeah.
Yeah, the whole idea, the aberration of isolated practice is itself a radical distortion of what we were born to do spiritually. I'm sorry, we weren't meant to go into caves. We weren't meant to sit on cushions. We were meant to be with one another in community and to surrender the limitations of psychological mind and isolated bodies, and to become part of a greater pattern of connection that dances us all in community. Mm-hmm. And you know what happens when you surrender? When you see the spirit or as being held by community, then no one stands around saying, I'm the healer, or I'm the shaman, or I'm the umkel.
Yeah.
What they say is, in community, the gods may just sort of grab somebody and utilize them as a jump start, and then it spreads to everyone. But when the dance is over, or when the ecstatic communion's over, everyone's back to being an equal idiot.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very important to them to level the ground, to not have the social hierarchies that then get all concerned about preserving the differences between us, rather than leveling those differences through humor. Not humility. Humility is a very tricky game.
Oh, speak about humility.
You see, humility is something people brag about, isn't it?
Yeah, that's well said.
So it ends up being a really veiled form of pride, a very nasty thing, that you have to be very careful about people talking about being humble. Because in fact, if you have the joy, you just want to shout and say, "I got the joy, and I have no doubt about it. It's so wonderful. I want to share it with you." Mm-hmm. You're not going to talk, say, "Well, I shouldn't say that I should never say that I'm a healer or I'm a shaman." No, if you felt the real thing, you're going to shout loud and clearly that the gods from time to time look at me and send me electricity, and I can't wait to hold you and share it. Mm-hmm. Now, what is it that we need to be empty vessels, not the arrogance of humility or feigned humility? What we need is to laugh our asses off. When we use one another, we level ourselves to ground and we get truly empty, not false emptiness with the declarations of word games that say, my oh my, each of us should be humble before we can be deserving. We have been so led astray. And even the things I'm saying now shouldn't be taken too seriously because they can themselves, spoil and distract and create an unnecessary dichotomy, dualism that we can get trapped in.
But Brad,
yes.
you say the world is made of stories, not atoms. So here you are telling a fantastic story.
It's wild, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's so wild, and it's strange for me to be talking because usually these days when I'm talking, I'm wanting to have a drum in my hands and be drumming at the same time, and then allowing the voice to go into song and music.
Where's your drum? Where is it?
There's always a drum. I've always got a drum.
Come on, pick up your drum.
I'll give you a little drumming. You want to hear a little drumming?
You better believe it.
Here it comes.
Okay.
So that's the sort of thing, you just sort of let it grab you, just let it sort of go wild, and you never know where it's going to take you, and it's not something anyone's going to sit down and go into a trance with, because you know what's happened? The word ecstasy has been completely
outlawed,
and it's worse. The academics have said ecstasy is a kind of trance, so that going into a kind of hypnotic trance becomes an ecstatic experience. Hold it. What is that business? It's not about sitting calm and having a guided imagery kind of visualization. That's not ecstatic experience. They've pulled the word away from its original intention. Ecstasy cannot be experienced unless the whole of you is quaking, shaking, moving around. I mean, it's something that grabs you. It's a joy so huge that you can't be still. In fact, what happens when you get into highest states of ecstasy, you can't even talk. You dance with the Bushmen all night. In the night, somebody comes up to you and asks you a question. You try to talk. It comes out. You just end up with sound making. Because in the intense ecstatic state, the voice is taken over to be an instrument that can help transmit the arrows of life force. And no longer is it having any concern about conveying understandings and linguistic nets that try to capture experiences that can never be caught. Instead, it's trying to free you from all that. So we might talk, and any moment we can just leave sense and go into nonsense. And I can say to you, I'm holding a phone, and it represents a chord that goes in all directions, including deep into the sea. But that drum can't ever be heard because of the blue nature of the tones deepest inside of us that have been long darkened. So I can go into
poetry,
concerning myself with sense, and let things move and shake us up inside our heads.
Brad, talk to us about collective eroticism. I mean, just like there's an incredible taboo on ecstasy, there's also a taboo in this culture and even in Europe on touching. And I feel that's so sad because so much is transmitted through touching each other.
The idea of someone espousing healing without touch is insane. This is what I learned from the greatest healers. In fact, there's a great Japanese healer who said the first thing necessary to create healing is to establish a skinship with the other.
A skinship.
And here we are. I mean, we look at methods of healing that don't touch. We hold the hands away from the body, and it's like, what is this? I mean, I showed these forms to the Bushmen, and they just fell to the ground laughing, saying, these people are crazy. They've lost their mind. Because the oldest way is that you have as much skin contact as possible.
Yes.
So you not only have people hands on, a palm touching the body, you have full embraced hugs, so the whole body is shaking another whole body. And sometimes the whole community piles on top of each other, becomes a kind of vibrating amoeba. And, of course, in our culture, if we look at that, we go, oh my, they're having
an orgy.
Yes. Because we think, everything has to be genitally localized. They don't know the eroticism of the whole, that all joy is erotic. Anything that is divine and blissful, anything that's divine has joy, and anything that has joy is realized and felt in the body. It is erotic. There is no separation. There is no sex-free God. There is no sex-free religion. There is no sex-free spirituality. It's fully sexual, and by saying fully, it means there's as much tingling in the tip of your fingertips and the top of your head as in the middle bullseye of you-know-where.
Exactly. Wonderful. Wonderful. Perhaps you'd say a few words about being a trickster. You're a trickster, Bradford Keeney.
Am I?
Yeah.
Now that you told me, may I still continue that, or does that put me in a different spot?
Oh, turn it up.
I think, you see, the metaphor for healing, the metaphor for being touched by spirit, the metaphor for transformation is shaking. Shaking is a wonderful metaphor for constant change, constant movement. The gods are always changing. And the Bushmen say in the beginning of time that everything was shape-shifting, that you would look down and find that in one moment you had the feet of an eland, in another moment you had the feet of a giraffe, and everybody was interchanging, and all the animals. And when the language came and gave names to things, it stopped. We became still, and that began sickness and death. So, to them, going to the original time where things are shape-shifting is very important, both as a metaphor and as an experienced reality. So, Trickster comes along and necessarily shakes every aspect of our being up. And to begin with, we typically know Trickster only in terms of how Trickster goes after sacred ideas. I mean, I love to say things like, if we really want the world's spiritual leaders to help us out right now, and do we ever need it, then we need to see the Pope and the Dalai Lama agree to exchange costumes for 1 week.
I love it.
Because if we can't see that kind of play and absurdity, then they have nothing to say. And when someone says, unless you follow it my way, and here's the protocol for how to be a shaman or how to be a healer, somebody needs to stand up and say, you don't get it. Because it is radically born in the moment with no expectation of what its form will be. You surrender to being the hands, the instrument of the gods, and they come down and they might do any kind of crazy thing with you. Sometimes you may be still and sometimes you might make a noise, but there ain't no protocol.
And who knows what costume you'll be wearing.
That's right. Who knows? I mean, you just might consider that the gods are going to do anything with you. And they may make you look like an animal. They may make you look like you need to wear a business suit, or that you need to have half of you be dressed in a formal way and the other half to be absurdly ridiculous. I can tell you this, it's going to catch you off guard, because all that teachers can do is trip you. The learning comes from being tripped out of the habits that you're stuck in. I'm talking about the habits of knowing, the habits of construing the world, the habits of feeling, the habits of orchestrating the everyday, the sequences that organize all the things from taking out the trash, from how you turn on your television set, to how you sit down and make a prayer. All these things need to be shaken up. All of them. And they constantly need to be shaking up. And that's not just the whole of it. The whole of your body needs to be shaken. So your everyday routines, your thoughts, your ideas, your beliefs, and your body all need to be shaken in a constant, never-ending dance. And then you are with the divine. So we're trapped, aren't we? Because anything we say, we have to undo.
Yes.
Anything that another says, we have to ridicule.
Yes.
And every time there is sacred ceremony, it must begin and end with absolute absurdity, with absolute profanity.
Absurdity.
We have to learn to curse, as well as we have to learn to bless.
And perhaps now, as we are bringing our conversation around, you could talk about tuning into the dream mind of nature.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
This is amazing. I mean, See, most people think that if you leave the world of textuality, the world of books, of libraries, of self-help pop guides, of handouts from workshops, you know, the world that we know, which is totally consumed and organized by the printed word. We think, okay, that means that you're in an oral tradition, but it's still a word game. Well, at this moment, I want to announce to the world that there are cultures that don't give much importance to words, other than words being used as instruments to shake us up and make us giggle. Because the giggle's the beginning of the wiggle, and the wiggle's the beginning of what's going to open you to the divine. Now, what happens if you sort of throw words out of the way? How do you pass on the most vital learnings? How do you learn to cook? How do you learn to hunt? How do you learn to dance? How do you learn to heal? How do you learn to find the sacred plants necessary for healing? How do you learn to commune with the gods? Well, what we find is that if you surrender to a life of being shaken it all up, so that this becomes the principal metaphor of your life. Another way of saying it is that, boy, I'm just sort of living in vibrations. Sometimes, I mean, I'm just feeling them all the time. And what can take place when you're in this phenomenal domain, when you're in this realm of vibratory excitement and joyful expression of the ecstatic, is from time to time, particularly when you vibrate with another human being, the two of you vibrate together, oh my heavens, it's like whole body orgasm. I'm not talking about the genital thing. That becomes boring compared to the whole of your being shot into outer space and into realms of, okay, true tantric is shaking together, vibrating together. It's not how it got dissociated and filtered into other kinds of sayings and knowings. What happens when you go through those realms is you might get lucky and find if you lie down in the middle of the night that the vibration, very high frequency, comes on the top of your head. And if you're familiar with what might happen, you're going to go, oh, I might be going for a journey. And what happens is that the knowing, the deep ways, the songs, the most important teachings come into you in a way that's like, I don't know how else to say it. It's like a direct downloading. It's like the gods are downloading you. And there are cultures throughout the world where these mysteries have been kept alive, and they call this going to school. They call it going to the spiritual classrooms. They learn to be so familiar with the vibratorial ways of being that they awaken these downloadings, and that's how they learn. They even learn how to cook. I meant that literally. They learn how to cook a cake, as well as carpentry skills, and they learn how to be vessels for healing. And in the oldest cultures, there are no oral custodians who say this is what we must pass on from generation to generation. No. They just shake together, knowing that when someone surrenders to the shaking and lives this and fully embraces it, that they'll get downloaded, and it'll just continue. Now, this is absolutely incredible news for the rest of us who keep running out to buy the next book. You know where I'm going.
Or saying that we know what we know.
We think it's about knowing, and knowing that we know, and it ends up doing nothing more than making us completely constricted and unavailable to let the Spirit move through us. We're not available for being downloaded because we've unplugged the connection. We've put up a barrier, if you wish, between our heart and the reception of what lies in front of us to receive, because we think it has to go through our knowing. All these spiritual teachers, and God bless them all, but you know, they're always talking about let's love one another, let's love, but it's love spoken by a head. I don't want a heart, I don't want a head talking about a heart. I want a heart shouting about life. And this is a very different kind of thing. Someone who's in the Spirit, it doesn't matter whether you understand what they're saying. It doesn't matter if they make anything that makes any sense at all. It's how they're talking and how they're making molecules move in the air that move you in a way that you never expected. And then it opens you to sort of have an accident to be ready and available to be struck by spiritual lightning.
Well, this is absolutely wow.
it's as if I were 20 again.
Yeah.
It were 36 years ago, and it just hit me. Every day I wake up and I say, I still can't believe it. I can't believe it. Then I go, well, you know what? It's not about believing anything. It's about experiencing it.
That's right.
And it's about, well, those who will say, and I won't mention names, those who say, well, shame, shame, shame. We can all be narcissistic fools searching for the ecstatic fix. They sort of go away, because what we need to do is go out there and save the world. Well, guess what? No willpower is going to save the world. Trying to do the right thing, ask anybody in Alcoholics Anonymous. AA says that the first thing you got to get over, and this is true not for those who have trouble with the bottle, but for anyone trying to live a life, the first thing you got to get over is you got to surrender that you're the captain of your life.
Yes.
You cannot willpower a thing. You have to be fully tuned. You have to be downloaded with the great joy. And when you have the joy and your heart's full, you do the right thing effortlessly and naturally because it brings greater joy. Because when you're full of joy, you want to share the joy. And that comes out in sharing a meal. That comes forth in sitting down talking to somebody who needs to be heard. It comes for all the things that need to be done happen without the need driving a willpower to make you do it to be good. That undoes it. And it backfires. And we end up having justifications for all kinds of one-upsmanship in the world that's made it a mess the way it is today.
Well, Brad, you have me smiling from ear to ear all through this conversation.
Well, I can feel your joy, and it's driving me on. I think I'm just recycling what I feel from you. This all works. We feel these things together.
That's right.
To say it, to shout it, to express it, to sing it.
Yes, yes. Tell me, my friend, because I just feel like saying that, tell me, my friend, is there anything you'd like to add as we finish this moment?
Well, again, I'm very grateful to have an opportunity to say things that rarely have opportunity to be said, let alone there be opportunities for them to be heard, because the words are drowning us so much from the kind of experience that's become itself taboo. And I invite everyone to consider joining me in celebrating the 60,000th anniversary of the beginning of ecstatic ways of living and healing by deciding from this day forward, I will simply make myself available for the great love, because that's what it is when we say the great joy, great ecstasy. We're talking about the fullest love.
Yes.
And that let us find one another. Let us find one another's brothers and sisters and come together and begin the great movement, the movement of our bodies, the movement of our hearts and souls, that we can then begin the vibrations, the quaking and shaking that's going to tear apart all the dualisms that have been straitjackets on people who can do nothing but get in the way because of their mind covering the whole of their being and heart. We just need to find each other and awaken the great shake, like I love to say. Move over meditation, shaking ecstasy. Shaking medicine is on its way.
Good. And people can join you in shaking. You give celebrations.
Yes.
And they can find times and places where they can celebrate with you on your website.
Right. Go to the website. There's a contact information. We're setting up what we call life force theaters, where we perform our being present, being moved by the Spirit in these ecstatic ways. And sometimes I refer to that as getting cooked. The way the original culture refers to times when we come together to be hit by spiritual lightning. It's like the gods throw us into the frying pan.
Yeah.
And they like to cook us. And we got to get in that pan as many times. We've got to shake everything up, all the ideas, all the beliefs, all the things we've held on to as cherished notions. We need to sort of shake up everything, from how we yawn, from how we even scratch the top of our head, to how we pick up a pencil, how we turn on a computer. We need to shake every little routine. The smaller the routine, the better. It's not that you need to go on a pilgrimage to a great high mountain somewhere far away. What you need to do is turn upside down the way you get out of bed in the morning.
Brush your teeth with a different hand.
It's going to come.
Okay. All right, Brad. Thank you with all my heart.
Thank you. Big hugs.
Big hugs to you, too.
Wonderful.
Bye.
Well, take care.
You too.